Hey there everyone, Grayson Roze here with StockCharts.com. Thank you so much for tuning in to this video here from StockCharts TV. I am thrilled to sit down with you today, take a look at my own personal StockCharts account, and show you some of the ways that I organize my own personal chart lists. Now, as many of you may know, chart lists, I think, are the most important tool, the most important feature on StockCharts. Now, I can argue that your charts are really important. All the settings that you use, all the indicators, the overlays, the colors, all of that good stuff, obviously massively important. But at the end of the day, the real reason that you are here on StockCharts, the real reason that you are a member is to save and organize those charts, to take whatever investment process, whatever trading approach that you have and build that into your account, build that into your StockCharts account. The way that you do that, of course, is through ChartLists. So today, what we're going to do is spend some time looking at one of my favorite things around the site, looking at chart lists and specifically talking about how I organize my chart lists for my approach to the market. There are tons of tips and tricks and different things that you're going to see today, and different lessons that I've learned over time. Now, I am an active investor, active trader, so what you're seeing really is what I use every single day and every single week, the routines, everything that I use to watch the markets. It's not just watching the markets though, it's also watching my portfolios. I have specific chart lists for my individual portfolios, different trading accounts, brokerage accounts, retirement accounts, all of that good stuff. You'll see that on today's show. And then also I have chart lists that help me organize my watch lists. I have chart lists that help me organize different market groups. You'll see all of that on today's show. So lots that we are going to cover. Hopefully we're going to have some fun. Hopefully you are going to have some takeaways here, learn some things around the site. So let's get to it. So we're starting off the presentation here from the members dashboard. Of course, the first page that you see when you log into StockCharts. As many of you may know, I like to call this the heart and soul of your StockCharts account because this page is totally customizable. You can see that we've got all of the different sort of corners of the market represented here. We've got a market overview, a sector summary. We've got the different market mover panels, what's moving the S&P 500, what's moving the S&P 400. So I've set this up in a very specific way for me. I love to watch the markets through the dashboard. But the other thing that I love about the dashboard, the reason that we're starting here today, is that this is really the best place to go to access your chart lists. So we're going to actually spend a lot of time on this page, just sort of running you through the organization, the structure, how I've kind of organized all of the chart lists in my account. Now to get there on this page, you can go right up here to the top right corner, give that chart list button a click. That's going to scroll you down the page and bring you right to all of your chart lists that you have saved in your account. Now, depending on your membership level, I know you have different numbers of chart lists you can create. So my account is at the pro level. I can create up to 500 chart lists in my account. You'll see I have about 163 right now. Now, I don't use all of those. Some of them are there just for fun. Some of them are there for occasional browsing. But we're going to start at the top because I've actually sort of custom ordered my chart lists in a very specific way for very specific reasons. And I want to show you how to do that because I think that's actually one of the most important things that you can do with your chart list, really organizing them. That's why we're starting here from the dashboard where you can just kind of see all of the chart lists in my account. Now we're also going to do this, by the way, in SharpCharts today. So if you are a longtime user of the site, you're probably using SharpCharts. That's our original tool, one that I still lean on heavily, one that I absolutely love. So do the rest of us here at StockCharts. But of course, you might be wondering, hey, what about ACP? That's the new interactive advanced charting platform, StockCharts ACP. ACP, kind of its own immersive experience, really kind of a destination on the site that you can go to for much more fluid, dynamic charting. We're doing a ton with that platform. It's continuing to evolve really kind of week over week. Point is, I'm bringing this up because chart lists exist over in the ACP world as well. So if I brought you over to ACP and kind of gave you this whole presentation in that world, we would have a very similar setup. You'd see that my ACP chart lists are organized in a very similar way. So regardless of what platform you are using, regardless of kind of where you're living on StockCharts, if you will, if you're a SharpCharts user, this is going to make a ton of sense to you. Hopefully, give you a sense of what you can do with your SharpCharts chart list. If you're an ACP user, these same concepts apply. The structure, the organization, that kind of thing. So now that we've touched on that, I want to breeze you through kind of all of the chart lists in my account, and then we'll sort of dive into the different sections. Up here at the top, you'll see that as I'm going through this, I've actually got a crazy kind of starring and numbering system, which is allowing me to actually custom order my chart lists. I'm going to touch on that a little bit more as we go through this, but that is something that you can do. You can order your chart lists. They are going to be alphabetical by default, but you can start to custom order those by coming up with whatever naming convention makes sense to you. You can use symbols, you can use numbers, you can use letters, you can use a combination of all of those in some crazy way, as I've kind of done here. But the point is that your chart lists by default in your account are going to be ordered alphabetically. And you can get around that and start to build your own organization in there by using a lettering or a numbering or a starring system, symboling system, whatever you want to use. So you'll see that here. I'm mentioning that right off the bat though, because there's only one chart list in my account that has a single star up front. You can see that right here. That's what I call my tier 1 watch list. This is the sort of dump bucket, if you will. As I'm going through the markets, I'm dumping stocks, funds, anything that catches my eye. I just kind of dump it into that tier 1 watch list. What I mean by dump it in there is that as I'm going through different things, if I find something that intrigues me, I will save that symbol, save that chart, save that ETF or that stock, whatever it is. I'll save it into the tier 1 watch list. From there, I can start to work with it. I'll generally move it out of the tier 1 watch list. That's why you'll see this doesn't have that many stocks in it, because I don't want to have 200 symbols on my tier 1 watch list. I want to be sort of filtering that and doing something with those names that are catching my attention. But I have this kind of tier 1 watch list, and I've actually set it up as the first list in my account so that anytime I'm on the ChartCharts workbench, this is the first list that appears in the drop-down menu. When I go to save a new symbol, this list is already going to be selected because it's the first list in all of my chart lists, the first one in all of my chart lists. So it makes it a little quicker to save things into this chart list. Again, that's kind of my go-to dump bucket. From there, I can move things around, I can annotate stuff, I can do whatever I want with it. But because this is the first one up, it makes it very, very quick, very, very easy from the ChartCharts workbench to save new symbols, new charts and everything into that list. So that's why I actually recommend that a lot of people take whatever their kind of dump bucket, whatever their watch list is going to be, their sort of filter list, and make that the first list in your account. That's a system that has worked really well for me. Now from there, we start getting into a lot of my sort of routine-driven lists. These are the lists that I use to evaluate the market on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. You'll see that the first list in here, first block of lists really, is all of my weekly lists. So these all start with weekly. That's because these are the lists that I review on a weekly basis. A lot of them are a little bit more long-term, take sort of a broader look at the market. I dig into a ton of different market metrics. We'll pull that up in just a minute. I'll kind of run you through what some of those look like. But the idea here is we're just kind of breezing through everything. I want you to understand that the first thing for me, I want to start at the top of the market. I want to start with a big, broad, long-term view from the top of the market. And from there, I can drill down further and further and further into specific corners. So in this case, every week, my most important day of the week actually is Sundays. That's when I do all of my portfolio review, looking at what's happened the previous trading week, thinking about what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months, everything like that. But my weekly routines, my weekly lists are really some of the most important in my account. And that's where I start. I start at the top of the market. We call this top-down analysis, really kind of drilling down through the market from the top down to the bottom. So my weekly lists are up here as a group. And as you'll see, I have a market evaluation list, which is very, very broad, brings in a whole bunch of different things. I'll show you that, like I said, in just a minute. And actually, I can even share it with you. So we'll talk about that a little later. But then from there, I go into some of the major global equities. I'm looking around the globe at different corners of global markets. We go into the US equity indexes after that. Then I drill down a little bit further into VTI in a couple of different views. That's the Vanguard Total Index. that is my preferred benchmark. A lot of people love to use, for instance, the S&P 500. I like to use VTI because it's the total market. At the end of the day, it's really, really broad. It's a little bit broader than the S&P 500. Very similar because it's still cap weighted, but the S&P 500, obviously, only large caps, only 500 stocks. VTI brings in even more because it's looking at the total market. So I like to drill into VTI, the total market, in a couple of different ways. I do the same for the S&P 500 after that, and then down into small caps with the Russell 2000. And from there, I can look at long-term views of the sectors. Then we can drill down into the next level below that. I can drill into long-term views of some of the US industry groups, the Dow Jones US industry groups. So all of these weekly lists are organized in this very specific way, and I'm just flipping through here. I'll show you how I do that a little bit later in the show. But I want you to understand that I've organized these, blocked them together in a very specific order, in a very specific way. So that's why I have the 2 stars, kind of keeps these all together as a group. And then I use the numbers to actually organize them in a specific order. So I want my high level market evaluation list at the top. I want to go into my global equities list after that, then into the US equities, then into some of those specific index watch lists is what I call them, then into the sectors, then into the industries. So using this starring and numbering system, I've been able to do that. Now I do the same thing with my daily market evaluation list. So these get a little bit more narrow. Again, the weekly stuff is all a little bit longer term, broader view. I want to think about sort of the long-term trends in the market, long-term moves, long-term directions, things like that. Then I can dive into very similar charts, very similar set of charts actually, but primarily kind of daily charts and narrower than that. So these are actually generally chart lists that I will look at every single day. This is kind of where my daily market review comes in. Again, these are all kind of weekly market review that I really only review on Sundays. And then we have our daily lists here that I review actually every day generally. Same kind of concept though. I've got my high level market evaluation lists, very broad, lots of different metrics in there. You'll see that in a couple of minutes. But I've got that above that daily version of that global equities list. So here I'm looking at some of those major index groups around the globe. Then we do the same thing for the US. I drill into some of the major indexes across different corners of the US stock market. Then I can actually take those major indexes from the US and drill into those in a couple of different time frames. Again, I'm going from that sort of high level, longer term view, drilling down further and further into the market. So I can actually go to a shorter term 6-month view. These in this list, as you'll see, are actually intraday charts. They're 60-minute charts. Then I have a 3-month view of a couple of those major indexes. Then I have actually a 1-minute 45-day view. So each bar on these charts represents 1 minute of trading activity, and it's over the last 45 days. So I can really kind of drill into some of the intraday action as well. Again, though, from the top down. Hopefully that's coming through. From there, after I've completed sort of my daily routines for the indexes overall, I can actually drill in, like we did on the weeklies, I can drill into the US sectors in a couple of different ways. So these are all daily charts of the US sectors, things like XLK, XLY, the traditional spiders that you're probably familiar with. We can do the same though in equal weight format. So the standard sector view is actually, those are cap weighted sectors. When you're looking at something like XLK, it's cap weighted, so it's going to be biased sort of towards the biggest stocks in that grouping. We can do an equal weight version of all those sectors though, where we take out that sort of cap weight bias. So I have a list that is the exact same list, basically same sectors, same kind of ideas, but we're looking at it in an equal weight format. And then I can actually compare the different weights. So we can look at how is the cap weighted sector versus the equal weight sector performing. We can look at those in some creative ways. So I have a list that does that. And then I kind of combine everything into one, which allows me to sort of view everything in one place. From there, I drill into the US industry group. So again, those Dow Jones industry groups, I've got all of those in a list, and I can look at daily charts for all of those. So that's kind of the structure here that we have for a lot of my market analysis routines. I have more lists down below, as you'll see, but these are really the go-tos for me. These are the lists that I absolutely make sure that I review every single week and every single day. So I review all of these weekly lists every Sunday. I review all of these daily lists every day during the market, after the close, things like that. Now, the next group up for me, and again, we'll kind of get back into to some of those to show you the charts, talk a little bit about maybe what's going on in the current climate. But today is really more about sort of giving you an understanding of how I've structured my account. So we're spending a lot of time just looking at names on ChartLists here today, but we will dive into a couple of those. The next group up for me, though, is all of my portfolios. Now, for me, just for my own process, I like to nickname my portfolios. I have a whole bunch of different brokerage accounts. I've got retirement accounts, IRA, 401k, that kind of thing. So I have all these funky nicknames for my portfolios. But I've got specific lists for each of those portfolios. So these are all my different portfolios. I have a chart list devoted to that portfolio. So I've got one for my brokerage account. I've got one for my retirement account. I've got one for my IRA. I've got one for my 401k, for instance. I've got a couple of different brokerage accounts actually with different brokerages. So I've got different chart lists for each one of those. Point is, though, you should have your portfolio, the things that you own, even if you've got multiple different portfolios, you should have a chart list with all of those in it. So I like to create individual chart lists for each of my portfolios, but then I also like to group things across a couple of different chart lists. So you'll see here with the plus signs, these are all of my individual portfolios, specific lists for each one of those. Then I actually combine things in a couple of different ways. Now, in my approach to the markets, I have three buckets. I have super core holdings, what I call super core holdings. Those are ultra long-term, kind of set it and forget it, 40 years. I just want exposure to the market, let it compound over the long term. That's what that is. But the stuff that I'm kind of more actively buying and selling, I have core positions and I have explore positions. That's what I call it. If you've read my book, 10 Style Trading, the 10 Essential Stages of Stock Market Mastery, that's going to be familiar to you. You can buy that, by the way, on Amazon or in the StockCharts store, store.stockcharts.com. You can check out that book. But in that book, I wrote a lot about core and explore investing, having sort of these longer term exposures through the core. For me, those are generally ETFs. Most of my core holdings are all ETFs, what I consider my core stuff. That is longer term. I'm typically viewing that more on like a weekly chart kind of basis, thinking out at least 12 months, maybe even longer with a lot of those. Then I have my explore positions. That's the individual stocks that I'm buying and selling, the stuff where I'm having a good time. I'm trading in there. That's where I'm really having fun in the markets, trying to come up with my own ideas and outperform the major indexes with individual stocks. So I have these couple of different buckets in my approach to the markets. Super core, the ultra long term, core, the longer term, and then explore the shorter term stuff where I'm really sort of going for growth with individual stocks. So point is, I've got a couple of different chart lists that take the individual positions from all of these different separate accounts, and I actually sort of put those into some shared lists. So I take all of the ETFs that I own across different places, put those into two lists. I have a daily version of it. So these are daily charts of all my core positions. And then I have weekly charts of all my core positions. I do the same thing for my explore positions. I've got daily charts for all my explore positions. And I do have weekly charts for all my explore positions because I like to take a longer term view on those, even if I am trading. I want to have that long-term perspective in mind. The final one that I do is actually my all positions list. So I'll take everything from in here, the super core, the core, the explore, I take it all and I put it in one list. Now this is great for a couple of different reasons. One, it's nice to just be able to go somewhere and say, I want to see a summary of everything I own. I want to see a candle glance view of everything I own. I actually also set up chart list reports on this for everything I own. So if I jump into this one really quick, jump over to the summary view, you'll see that my all positions list has the weekly chart list reports turned on. That's going to send me at the end of the trading week a summary of what everything in this list, everything that I own, what that did for the week. So I love to be able to turn that on. Just gives me in one email a summary of everything that I own at the end of the trading week. So I like to put everything into that one shared list as well. So a couple of different ways of kind of organizing my individual positions, my portfolios. Now the next group up after that is some of my what I call my stalking lists. I have a couple of different stalking lists and a buying list. So there's a whole bunch of things in here. These are the things that I'm actively watching. If something gets kicked out of my explore group, if something that I'm trading I want to get out of, I know what I'm sort of rotating into next because I'm maintaining the stalking lists, which are watch lists for me, sort of the next level down after that tier 1 list that we were talking about. And then I've got my buying list, which is things that I'm really, really intrigued by. There's a breakout that I really want to target, or a specific move that I'm really interested in, a chart setup that I'm really watching closely. That's when it makes its way all the way down, sort of filters down to the buy list. That's the stuff that I will actually think about picking up. Now, I've got a couple of lists after that. These are actually scan result lists. So I've got scans in my account that I run every day after the close, and I generally merge those throughout the week into the same list. I've talked a lot about this in different presentations, talked a lot about this on my show on StockCharts TV, StockCharts in Focus. That's what that show is called every Friday. But for instance, I've got a scan that I run after the close every day of the market. I take those results. It's a scan for all-time highs in the S&P 1500. So I take those results every day after the close, run that scan, take those results, and I merge it into this list every day. So I do it on Monday, I merge it in. I do it on Tuesday, I merge those results into that same list. I run that scan on Wednesday, merge the results into this same list. By the end of the week, when I get to Friday, when we talk about my weekend routines, I talk about why Sunday is really important for me. I now have a list, this list right here, that's full of all the stocks in the S&P 1500 that made an all-time high during that week, the week that just ended. Because I've been merging everything into the same list as the week goes on, I've sort of built that up. And by the time I get to after the close on Friday, when I sit down with my stuff on Sunday, for instance, really kind of dive into the markets on Sunday, I have a list to review that's all of the stocks in the S&P 1500 that made an all-time high that week. So this is very, very important for me. New highs are what I like to find. I like breakouts to new highs. So this is really kind of the first place that I go. So I can go in here, I can look into to that list for new opportunities, new things that I might want to find. I've got a couple of those in here as well. I run those scans in a couple of different ways. I've got other scans in my account as well, but these new highs lists that I run every day after the close are very, very important. That's where a lot of my trade targets actually come from. I do have a couple of lists in here as well. One is called Scan Sweep. So if I run scans, I can just kind of throw the results into this Scan Sweep list, and I can actually review that, sort of filter it down. Those are the other scans that I'm running for specific things like P&F triple top breakouts, for instance. I'll take the results, I'll throw it in that Scan Sweep list, and that'll be kind of a thing to review. When I get alerts that fire off as well, I can take some of those results from the email that goes out. When an alert fires off, I can grab those symbols, put them into my alert review list as well. So this is kind of a working list for me as well. Now the next group up for me is what I call my theme trades list. These are kind of interesting, something that I've talked a lot about in different investment seminars and different courses and things like that I've taught. One thing that I love to do is have lists in my account that are, as I just kind of said, working lists. They're constantly evolving. They're not about market review. They're not about portfolios or anything like that. They're really just about kind of building these lists as I go. So what I mean by that is I have a list in my account. You can see it right here. I call it my like list. Now, there is no strategy to this list at all. It's a list that I maintain. As you can see, there are 93 different stocks, different funds in it. As I'm going about my daily life, if I notice a company that has an interesting product, if I notice that I'm subscribed to a specific service, if someone tells me about a new company that they just started working for and they're doing great things, I'll look that up, see if it's publicly traded, and if it is, I'll throw it on my like list. Companies that I like, services that I use, products that I love, anything like that, I'll just throw those symbols onto my like list. Now, I can run scans against that like list. I can review all the charts in that like list. I can do things, for instance, like scan for new 52-week highs in that like list. So if there's a company that I love or a service that I'm subscribed to and it's making new highs, well, that's great. I've now discovered something out in the real world that makes sense to me, something that I've sort of observed in the real world. I call this observational investing, if you've ever heard me talk about it. I've taken those kind of real world observations. I'm now applying sort of a technical market filter to it by scanning that like list for new highs. And if something that I love out in the real world is strong, it's outperforming the market, it's got a beautiful trend to it, that is a great target for me. That gives me kind of an interesting reason to go and look at some of these opportunities. So I love to maintain what I call this like list, which really is just kind of another one of those dump buckets for me. I'm constantly adding things to my like list as I stumble across great companies, great services, new IPOs of companies that I'm intrigued by. Something like Airbnb, let's say, goes public, and you just kind of want to say, well, I've rented a couple of Airbnbs in the past. I'm really intrigued by Airbnb. Let's throw it on the like list, and if it starts to outperform the market, starts to make new highs, it'll be there. It'll start coming up in some of those scans that I'm running. So that's what I mean by like list, kind of the observational investing list for me. We talk a lot about technical analysis. We talk about fundamental analysis. For me, the third bubble that people really need is observational investing. You got to take a look at the world around you. You got to think about what makes sense, what you're seeing out there. At the end of the day, public companies are companies that have products, services, different things that are in use out there in the real world. You look at something like Netflix, you look at something like Apple, those are products out in the real world. So I like to kind of bring that observational approach into my technical and fundamental approach as well, kind of the third bubble for me. Now, I also have what I call theme trades lists in here. So there are all these different themes that people are constantly talking about, things that pop up. For instance, online shopping, becoming a big thing. People always talking about online shopping. People talking about the cloud or automation or cybersecurity. So I actually have these theme trades lists, which are full of companies that fit into that theme. Something like renewables and EV or remote work, any companies that stand to benefit from some of those big themes that you hear about in the market, I like to create a chart list in my account for that theme, and then kind of track that over time. So you can see I actually have a list up here. I run scans after the close that basically scan all of these lists and look for new 52-week highs among those themes. So another kind of interesting thing that I do, kind of building off that same like list concept. So that kind of brings me down to everything below the lists that I use quite a lot. So there are a whole bunch of different things in here. I've got some lists in my account for instance, ETFs that I've heard about, ETFs that are just kind of intriguing to me. Maybe you've heard about some of the ARK funds. You want to just kind of dump those into a list. I have a list for that. From there, I get into a lot of the lists that I use a little bit less frequently, but a lot of kind of market evaluation lists. You'll see that these are also ordered in a very specific way, but these are kind of the next level down. I've got my go-to list that I reviewed up at the top, which we might run out of time to really dive into. But I've got those go-to lists for my weekly and my daily routines. And when I want to kind of drill into a specific corner of the market, something like breadth or something like sentiment, I actually have additional lists down here for those as well. So I've got sort of everything in another block down below. Now this is organized in the same way though. We're looking from top to bottom. This is all a top-down approach. So we're looking at the very highest level of the market here into things like intermarket analysis. We look back at market history actually. I've got a whole list devoted to market history, tops and bottoms from the past, for instance. We can look at large versus mid versus small caps, similar in structure to what we were doing up above. We're kind of drilling down into the market from the top down. So all of these different sort of metrics that we want to watch at the high level, thinking about the market as a whole. We can then get down into some of the major US index ETFs. We can look at specific S&P indexes, specific Russell indexes. We can get a little more global. We can look at country funds. I've got lists for bonds and commodities and gold and currencies and cryptos as well. From there, I can dive into the sectors. So some of those lists that we were looking at up above, I've got other versions of those down here as well. I can look at specific sectors. So here I actually keep all of the sort of top holdings of those specific sectors. So all of the top holdings in the technology sector, for instance, I've got a list devoted to those. Because again, those are cap weighted. So I want to keep an eye on the big outsized weightings in some of those sectors. Keep an eye on how those charts are setting up. We get down into US industry groups. Again, I can dive into those a little bit more. We've got specific members of the S&P 100, 500, 400, and 600. So if I ever want to go through all of the stocks in the S&P 500, I've actually got a list devoted to that. I do the same thing with NASDAQ 100 members and Dow Industrial members, Dow Transports, Dow Utility members. And then I have another one of those ETF lists. This is another place where I'm kind of dumping ETFs that I've just kind of heard about over time. It's a very, very broad collection of ETFs that are intriguing, sort of investable ETFs, things that I think are investable, for instance. So I've got a whole bunch of those in my accounts. Some strategy lists as well. So I've got a list of some different bearish inverse ETFs, bullish leveraged ETFs. I keep lists for quite a wide range of different things. Also specific ETF providers. So for instance, ARK, someone we hear a lot about. I've actually got a specific list for ARK ETFs, all of those ARK funds in one list. I've got one for Global X ETFs, one for Van Eck ETFs. So I have a couple of those ETF providers that I've called out as doing interesting things. Global X, for instance, does a lot of thematic ETFs. So I like to kind of track some of those Global X ETFs. Now, below that, I've also got chart packs. So, for instance, I've got Dave Keller's chart pack installed in my account. A great one that you should definitely go get because it's totally free. Dave Keller's morning coffee routine is all of these DK-morning chart lists in my account. So I've actually installed that. Below here, I have some leftover lists from my chart pack. I actually have a chart list that my co-author, Grayson Roze, my father and I, have put together. So we also have that available. It's really kind of built on a lot of the lists in my account though. So I don't actually have that chart list in my account because all of the lists came from my account. So kind of different there. But and then below that, I have a whole bunch of different lists that we use for StockCharts, StockCharts TV, things like hosting the pitch, that kind of thing. So these are kind of miscellaneous lists at the bottom. The important stuff though is, as we were showing off, up at the top. Hopefully what you've seen in this presentation is that structure. Hopefully that's come through. Again, having my most important weekly review lists up at the top, having my most important daily review lists next up, having specific lists for my portfolios, and then specific watch lists. Having this kind of structure makes it really, really easy for me to navigate all of the chart lists in my account. When I sit down on a Sunday, I'm not having to fumble around with the list saying, where am I going? Where was that chart? Where did I put it? I have a very organized structure and I can really just go boom, 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 all the way down here, just kind of flipping from one list to the next because I've spent that time organizing it, because I've spent that time coming up with a very specific order and a very specific structure. So ultimately, routines are the things that separate successful investors from unsuccessful investors. Routines and the discipline to stick to them, that's what makes you successful in this game. And so having that routine, having that structure kind of built into your chart lists, that's what really makes stock charts fly. That's why I like to say that chart lists are the most important feature on the site by far. Now, I wish we had a little bit more time so we could have really sort of jumped into some of these lists. I will show you, because I talked about that market evaluation list, that is one that I do have on my Twitter. So if you go find me on Twitter at Grayson Roze, there's actually a link in a pinned tweet right up at the top to this list. I've got it in a shareable format so I can actually give it to you. You can sort of get a sense of some of the things that I review on a weekly basis. I've also got other ones for daily. All those lists actually that I showed you are in a shareable format. We also did, I will mention, an episode of Stock Charts in Focus covering all of that stuff in great detail. So if you go to YouTube, you search Grayson Roze, ChartList, Stock Charts in Focus, something along those lines, I'm sure that that episode will pop up. We really spent some time going through a lot of these lists, and I talked through a lot more of the charts within. In that YouTube video, in the description down below, there's also links to the shared versions of all these chart lists. You can actually go get them in your own account. But these are the kinds of things that are in my weekly market review list. Here's, for instance, an intermarket view looking at all of the major asset classes, comparing things over the last 2 years. We've got other stuff up in here, for instance, global markets. So this is looking at the US versus the total globe versus everything other than the US. We've got stuff like emerging markets versus developed markets. These are the kind of things that I like to look at on a weekly basis. So lots and lots of different charts in here. And again, the idea is that I'm able to just kind of go through this from the top down. You can see here, once I actually get into something like Chartbook or something like 10 per page to review these charts, because I've got that structure in here, it's very easy for me to just go from one list to the next. Now we're looking at that global equities list. So here we're looking at that long-term view of things like the total world, things like the total international index, things like the EFA index. So again, because I've got that structure, very easy to go through all of these chart lists. So that is the value of spending time organizing these, coming up with whatever your organization is, whatever your system is for organizing them, numbering, lettering, whatever it is, make sure that you've got something. Build a little bit of that structure into your chart list. Build a little bit of that kind of routine approach into your chart list. So hopefully that has come through. I know we covered so much in this little 30-minute episode here of this show, but always reach out to me if you have any questions. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me around the site. If you send anything into our customer support team, that'll always make its way over to me. So if you got questions, anything that you're wondering about, feel free to reach out. But hopefully this has given you a sense of kind of what you can do with ChartList, how I organize my own personal chart list, some tips, tricks for getting more out of this all-important feature of StockCharts. Truly one that I think is the most important of StockCharts membership. But hopefully you've seen some good stuff today. Remember, some of these lists are available in a shared format. So you can go find that market evaluation one on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, find me at Grayson Roze, Rose with a Z. Find me there, look for that pinned tweet at the top of my profile, and there's actually a link in there to my market evaluation list, the weekly one. But again, search YouTube for that episode of StockCharts in Focus that we did, really kind of digging into some of these same topics. But in the description of that video, we do have all those shared lists available for you. So you can actually pull those up, you can save them into your own account. You can start to build some of this structure into your own account based on some of the lists that I watch on a weekly and a daily basis. I want to thank you again for joining me. Thank you so much for tuning in here to StockCharts TV. My name is Grayson Roze, Vice President of Operations here at StockCharts.com. Thank you again. I'll be back with you soon, but until then, chart on, my friends.
Hey guys, Dave Keller here with StockCharts.com. Thanks so much for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, and we hope you did, hit the like button right below. Also, we have so much new content every day. Consider subscribing to the channel. Just hit the subscribe button in the video or right below. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Have a fantastic day.